The sound of crying echoed through the grand yet cold halls of the mansion. It was not the sound of a mafia boss's enemies begging for their lives, nor the desperate wails of those caught in his iron fist. No, this was the relentless, high-pitched cry of a baby. Won-shik pinched the bridge of his nose, eyes narrowing as he tried to maintain his composure. On the large screen in front of him, 5 men appeared, their faces hard and lined with the cruel expressions of men who had seen too much blood. They were his associates, leaders of different branches of the Mafia, powerful and merciless. The topic was business, a new shipment route, betrayal within their ranks, money that needed to be laundered quickly before authorities sniffed too close. But none of them could focus. Because above all their voices, Key, the tiny bundle of flesh and frustration in the next room, screamed like the world was ending. One of the men on the call, an older boss with graying hair and a cigar dangling from his lips, sneered into his camera. "Won-shik, he drawled mockingly. "You call a meeting about life and death, yet all I hear is your brat wailing like a ghost in the background. Handle your affairs." A muscle twitched in Won-shik's jaw. His chestnut hair fell over his forehead as he tilted his head back, forcing himself not to explode. His reputation was of a man who never lost control, never allowed distractions. Yet here he was, the dragon-tattooed mafia lord, brought to his knees by the cries of a baby barely 6 months old. He ended the call with a sharp motion, the screen going black. Silence from his men, but no silence in his house. The baby's cries grew louder, shriller, tugging at something inside him that he didn't quite understand. He stormed out of his office, down the marble hallway lined with dark wood and weapons hidden behind decorative panels. His men, dressed in black, armed, disciplined, stiffened as he passed, none daring to comment on the racket that filled the mansion day and night. He pushed open the nursery door. There was Key, red-faced, fists clenched, tiny legs kicking in fury inside his expensive crib. His cries were endless, unyielding, as though every breath was fuel for another scream. Won-shik sighed, lifting his son awkwardly. The crying didn't stop. The baby thrashed, squirming, his small body vibrating with energy. Won-shik wasn't a man who gave up easily, but this was a war he wasn't winning. "Why won't you stop?" he muttered under his breath, voice low and edged with frustration. "I gave you everything. Formula, warm clothes, the best crib money can buy. What do you want from me?" He only wailed louder, his little fingers grasping at the collar of his father's shirt. The dragon tattoo on Won-shik's neck flexed with every strained breath as he rocked the baby, though awkwardly, like a man holding a bomb that might go off at any second. For months, this had been his reality. His wife, no, the woman who had been his wife, died giving birth. It wasn't love. Their marriage had been an arrangement, convenience, a merging of power that ended in tragedy. Won-shik hadn't cried for her, hadn't mourned in the way a man might for a soulmate. But Key was different. He was blood. And yet, every night, every day, he screamed. Babysitters came and went, some lasting a week, others barely 2 days. None could handle him. Even the most praised nannies in Seoul's high society failed. No amount of money could buy the one thing Won-shik needed: silence. And peace. For a man running the largest mafia syndicate in Korea, peace was already a rare luxury. Now, with his son's constant crying, it was non-existent. Won-shik stared at the boy in his arms, chest heaving. "I kill men for less than this," he muttered, half to himself, half to the child who didn't understand a word. Later that night, sitting in the dim light of his office, Won-shik made his decision. This time, he would not rely on online reviews, not on glowing recommendations from other parents or experts. He would not trust resumes, certificates, or kind words. No. This time, he would bring each candidate into his home, sit them down, and put his son directly in their arms. If Key stopped crying, just once, then perhaps he had found the answer. It was then, in the quiet storm of his thoughts, that Karina's name appeared in the long list of applicants. Karina adjusted her hair nervously as she stood in front of the tall, iron gates. They towered over her, dark and uninviting, the kind of gates you saw in dramas where a heroine walks unknowingly into the lair of danger. Her phone buzzed with the reminder of the job posting. 1-week position. $2 million. Babysitter needed urgently. Confidential household. $2 million. For 1 week. She had reread the listing 10 times before daring to apply. At first, she thought it was a scam. But then the response came, fast, professional, direct, and suddenly she was here, standing in front of a mansion that radiated power and danger. Her heart thumped. She needed the money. Her life in Korea hadn't been easy. After breaking off with her boyfriend, the man she thought would give her the kdrama love story she dreamed of, everything crumbled. The apartment they shared, the little savings she had left, even her confidence. Starting over was hard. Survival was harder. And now, standing here, she prayed this was the beginning of something better. The gates opened slowly, with a metallic groan. 2 men in black suits appeared, their expressions unreadable, eyes sharp. Karina swallowed, clutching her small bag. This way, one of them said curtly. They led her through the winding driveway, past expensive cars parked neatly, past fountains where water glistened under the pale moonlight. Every corner screamed wealth. But there was also something else here, something darker that crawled along her skin. When they reached the grand entrance, the doors opened before she could ask. And there he was. Won-shik. He stood tall in the doorway, chestnut hair tousled as though he hadn't slept, a cigarette between his fingers. His sharp jawline, cold eyes, and the dragon tattoo crawling up his neck gave him an aura that was both magnetic and terrifying. Karina froze. He wasn't just handsome. He was the kind of handsome that made you forget how to breathe, but also reminded you that touching him might burn. His gaze swept over her, lingering briefly on her ebony skin, her long curls, before landing on her eyes. Something flickered there, curiosity perhaps, but it was gone in an instant, replaced by indifference. You're here for the job, he said flatly, his deep voice filling the space. Karina nodded quickly. Yes. Babysitting. I applied. His lips curled slightly, though it wasn't a smile. Follow me. The interview didn't happen in an office or a lounge. It happened in the nursery. Won-shik led her inside, where the cries of a baby filled the air once again. The sound cut through Karina's chest like a blade, but instead of shrinking away, her arms ached instinctively with the urge to comfort. This is key, Won-shik said simply, walking toward the crib. He lifted the baby with the same awkwardness as before, the child wailing uncontrollably. Then, without warning, he turned to Karina. Take him. Karina blinked. What? Take him, he repeated firmly. That's the interview. If he stops crying with you, you're hired. If not, you leave. Her heart hammered. She had expected questions, paperwork, maybe a test of skills. Not this. But before she could overthink it, he placed the small, wriggling bundle into her arms. And then, like magic, the world shifted. Ki, stop crying. Just like that. The baby nestled against her chest, tiny fingers curling into her hair as if he had always known her. His breathing slowed, the frantic cries turning into soft whimpers, then silence. Won-shik stared, stunned. For months, no one had managed to quiet his son. No nanny, no relative, no hired help. But this woman, this stranger, held him for barely a minute, and he was at peace. Karina looked down at the child, her lips curving into a gentle smile. Hey, little one. You're tired, aren't you? That's okay. I've got you. The tenderness in her voice, the warmth in her eyes, it was disarming. Even Won-shik, who prided himself on being untouchable, felt something stir in his chest. For the first time in months, his house was quiet. And it was because of her. You're hired, he said abruptly, his voice gruff, though his gaze didn't leave her face. Karina blinked. Just like that. Just like that. Their eyes met, hers wide with surprise, his hard yet searching. And in that moment, though neither realized it yet, the path of their lives had shifted. Karina awoke the next morning to a silence so profound it unsettled her. She had expected cries, the same shrill wails that rattled the mansion's walls the night before. Instead, there was only the muffled sound of footsteps, the distant hum of men speaking in low tones, and the rustle of leaves against the tall windows. For a moment, she thought she had dreamed it all. The intimidating Mafia boss, the dragon tattoo on his neck, the way his son had stopped crying the instant she held him. But the weight of the silk blanket draped over her, and the memory of Key's tiny fingers curled around her own reminded her that it had been very, very real. She sat up in the guest room where she had been placed, stretching her arms. The room was elegant but cold, decorated with dark wood and sharp lines, not warmth. Everything in this house was like its owner, rich, intimidating, but distant. A soft knock on the door startled her. When she opened it, one of the suited men from the night before bowed slightly. "Boss requests you in the dining hall." Her heart skipped. Boss. That word carried weight. Back home, it would have meant employer, someone in charge. Here, she knew exactly what it meant. Mafia boss. Leader. Dangerous man. Still, she followed. The dining hall was larger than her old apartment. A chandelier hung above the long table, its crystals scattering the morning light into fractured rainbows. On one end sat one chick, his hair damp as if he had just showered, a crisp black shirt rolled up at the sleeves revealing the ink that snaked across his arm. Beside him, in a high chair, sat Key. But unlike yesterday, the child wasn't crying. Instead, he gurgled softly, gnawing on a teething ring while his father absent-mindedly fed him spoonfuls of mashed fruit. The sight froze Karina mid-step. One chick, the ruthless Mafia boss, looked almost human in that moment, almost ordinary. His dragon tattoo flexed with every motion of his arm, but his eyes, sharp and cold, softened fractionally each time he looked at his son. His gaze lifted when she entered. "You're late," he said flatly. Karina blinked. "It's 7 in the morning." He didn't smile. In this house, 7 is late. Her lips parted, but she swallowed back a retort. This was her job. $2 million. 1 week. She could swallow her pride. He gestured toward the seat across from him. "Sit." She obeyed, the weight of his eyes heavy on her as one of the staff placed breakfast before her. Toast, eggs, fruit. Simple, but plated with elegance. For a moment, the room was silent except for Key's soft noises and the clink of cutlery. Karina felt like she was sitting in the middle of a lion's den, every muscle tense. Finally, one chick spoke. "Where are you from?" The question caught her off guard. His tone was casual, but his eyes were sharp, as though weighing her answer. "Nigeria," she replied softly. "But I've been in Korea for a while now. Studying, working, surviving." His eyebrow lifted slightly at the last word. Surviving? Karina hesitated. Talking about her ex, the heartbreak, the struggle. None of it seemed appropriate here. Not with this man. "Life hasn't exactly gone the way I planned. But I'm managing." His eyes lingered on her a moment longer, then shifted back to his son. "Why take this job?" Karina blinked. "Why? Isn't it obvious?" "The money." "I've seen women apply for less," he interrupted coldly. "Money isn't the only reason people come knocking on my door. So I'll ask again. Why take this job?" Karina's chest tightened. She could feel the test in his voice, the suspicion. This wasn't just about babysitting. He was a man who didn't trust easily, who probably suspected every new face of being a spy, a threat, a liability. She took a slow breath. "Because your son needs someone. And because I need a chance. That's all." His eyes stayed on her unblinking. The silence stretched so long she wondered if she'd said the wrong thing. Then finally he nodded once, almost imperceptibly. "Eat," he said simply, ending the interrogation. Throughout breakfast, Karina couldn't stop sneaking glances at him. The way his shirt clung to his broad shoulders, the casual dominance in how he carried himself, the air of danger that clung to him like a second skin. It was intoxicating and terrifying all at once. And every time their eyes met, she felt heat rush through her chest. One chick, for his part, noticed more than he let on. The way she held herself with quiet dignity despite being out of place, the warmth that softened her features when she looked at Key, the way her curls framed her face like a crown, there was something disarming about her. Something he hadn't anticipated.
And he didn't like it.
Later that day, Karina found herself alone with Key in the nursery. He was fussy again, but not wailing. She rocked him gently, humming a soft melody from home. One chick appeared at the door, unnoticed at first. He leaned against the frame, arms crossed, watching. Her voice was soft, almost tender. "Hush, little one. Don't cry. The world's too big and scary, but you're safe here." Key's eyes fluttered closed, his tiny hand resting against her chest. One chick felt a strange pull in his chest. The house had been a battlefield of noise and exhaustion for months, but now it was quiet, peaceful, and it was because of her. He stepped inside, his presence filling the room. Karina looked up startled. Their eyes locked. For a moment, the world narrowed to just them. The dangerous man with the dragon tattoo and the woman who somehow tamed both his son and the storm in his heart. "Whatever you're doing," he said quietly, "keep doing it." Karina swallowed, her throat dry. "He just needs love. That's all." Their gazes lingered longer than necessary. The air thickened, charged with something unspoken. His lips parted slightly, as if to say more, but a sharp knock on the door broke the moment. One of his men appeared, urgency in his tone. "Boss, we found the traitor." And just like that, the Mafia world came crashing back in. One chick's expression hardened, the softness vanishing. He turned to Karina, his voice clipped. "Stay here. Don't leave this room. No matter what you hear." Then he was gone, his footsteps heavy, leaving Karina with a sleeping child and a heart that beat far too fast. The muffled thud of footsteps faded down the hall, leaving Karina alone in the nursery. The air felt heavier after one chick's abrupt departure, as though the walls themselves were bracing for the violence about to unfold elsewhere in the mansion. She looked down at Key, who slept soundly against her chest, oblivious to the storm brewing outside. His small hand curled around the fabric of her blouse, his tiny breaths warm against her skin. Karina exhaled slowly. "What kind of world am I in?" she whispered. Back in Nigeria, she had dreamed of Korea as a land of romance, opportunity, and beauty. She had imagined soft cherry blossoms, couples holding hands, and the glow of neon lights. She hadn't imagined mafia bosses with dragon tattoos, crying babies, and orders that carried life and death weight. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out carefully, shifting Key into her arm. A message from her friend back home lit up the screen. "How's Korea treating you? Found your kdrama oppa yet?" Karina stared at the words, her lips pressing into a thin line. If only her friend knew. Her gaze flickered toward the door. One chick had told her to stay, no matter what. But curiosity gnawed at her. And fear. Down in the basement of the mansion, one chick stood in the center of the dimly lit room. The traitor knelt before him, blood already seeping from a cut on his forehead, eyes wide with terror. Around them, his men formed a silent circle, waiting for their boss to act. One chick's face was a mask of cold indifference. He rolled up his sleeves, the ink of his dragon tattoo glinting under the harsh light. He looked nothing like the man who had fed his son mashed fruit just hours ago. "You stole from me," one chick said evenly, his voice low but sharp enough to cut through the silence. "And no, boss, I swear." The backhand came swift, brutal. The man spat blood, his pleas drowned out by the weight of authority in the room. One chick crouched, bringing his face level with the trembling man. His chestnut hair shadowed his piercing eyes, and when he spoke, it was almost gentle. Almost. "You don't lie to me," he murmured. "You knew the rules. You knew the price. And yet, you thought you could betray me." He straightened, pulling a pistol from the holster at his side. The sound of metal clicking echoed. The traitor's cries grew frantic. "Please, boss. I have a family." One chick's jaw tightened, but there was no hesitation in his gaze. He aimed. A soft gasp broke the silence. Every head turned toward the door. Karina stood there, frozen, her hands clutching the doorframe. She had meant only to peek, only to quiet the nagging curiosity, but the sight before her rooted her in place.
Blood, guns, fear.
And one chick, standing like a god of death. For a moment no one moved. The tension was suffocating. "Who let her in here?" one of the men hissed. Karina's lips parted, but no words came. She should run, she told herself. She should turn and flee. But her feet refused to obey. One chick's eyes locked onto hers. His expression didn't soften, it hardened, like steel clashing against itself. He lowered the gun slowly, never breaking her gaze. "Take him away," he ordered his men, his voice quiet but lethal. "I'll deal with this later." The traitor was dragged out, leaving only one chick and Karina in the heavy silence of the basement. "Didn't I tell you to stay in the room?" His voice was calm, but it cut sharper than a blade. Karina's throat went dry. I heard voices. I wanted to see. You don't see." His steps echoed as he walked toward her. "Not in this house. Not in my world." She backed up instinctively, but he stopped just short of her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him, smell the faint trace of smoke and steel that clung to his skin. Her pulse thundered. Fear and something else, something hotter, more dangerous, warred inside her. "I told you to stay out," he said, his gaze boring into her. "Do you want to die here, Karina?" The way he said her name, it was the first time and it made her chest tighten. Her voice trembled, but she forced herself to meet his eyes. "I didn't mean to." "But you," she swallowed hard, the image of him with the gun burned into her mind. "You were about to kill him." His lips twitched, not in amusement, but in a kind of bitter acknowledgement. "That's what I do. That's who I am." Her breath hitched. "You should be afraid of me," he added, his voice dropping lower, rougher. Karina's heart pounded. She was afraid. Every instinct screamed at her to run. And yet she wasn't moving. Because fear wasn't the only thing burning in her chest. One chick noticed it too. Her wide eyes, trembling lips, the way she stood her ground even when she should have collapsed in terror. It ignited something inside him, something he hadn't felt in years. Their faces were inches apart now, the air between them electric. His hand lifted, as if to brush against her cheek, but he stopped, fingers hovering just shy of her skin. A war raged in his eyes. To touch her would be to cross a line he couldn't uncross. The sound of footsteps above shattered the moment. One of his men called down urgent. "Boss, the shipment's ready." One chick exhaled sharply, stepping back. The spell broke. "Go upstairs," he said curtly, his voice rougher than before. "And stay there. Next time, don't test me." Karina swallowed hard, nodding quickly, though her chest ached in ways she didn't understand. She turned and fled up the stairs, her hands shaking. One chick watched her leave, jaw tight, the ghost of temptation still burning in his veins. For the first time in years, control felt like it was slipping from his grasp. The house felt different after that night. Karina carried Key through the halls, rocking him gently, humming soft lullabies. But her mind wasn't on the child. It was on his father. On the way his eyes had bored into hers in that basement. On the way his hand had hovered just short of her cheek, as if he had been tempted to touch her. And most of all on the gun. She hadn't grown up sheltered. Life had its hardships, but she had never seen someone hold life and death so casually in their hands. It terrified her. It should have sent her running. But instead, when she thought of one chick, fear tangled with something warmer, something she couldn't name without blushing. She shook her head sharply.
No.
She couldn't allow herself to feel anything for him. He was her employer. More than that, he was dangerous. And yet, she remembered how Key had quieted in her arms, how one chick's expression had softened when he saw it. There was more to him than the dragon tattoo and the gun. That contradiction haunted her. That evening, as dusk painted the sky in streaks of crimson, Karina noticed Key fussing more than usual. His cheeks were flushed, his cries weaker, more pitiful than before. Alarm jolted through her. She pressed her palm to his forehead and gasped. He was burning. Her heart thundered. She had cared for children before, but this was different. This was Ki, Wonshik's son, the baby who had chosen her arms, who had stopped crying only with her. She bolted from the nursery, clutching the feverish child. Wonshik, she cried, her voice breaking through the mansion's halls. He appeared within seconds, striding from his office, irritation flashing across his face. But when his eyes fell on his son, red-cheeked, whimpering against Karina's chest, that irritation dissolved into raw fear. What happened? His voice was sharp, almost panicked. He's burning up, Karina said quickly. He has a fever. We need a doctor. Wonshik barked an order, and within moments, his men were rushing to fetch the best pediatrician money could buy. But even with help on the way, he couldn't mask the fear in his eyes. Karina held the child close, whispering soothing words, rocking him. Wonshik hovered, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. He had faced bullets, betrayal, even death itself, but the sight of his son in pain shook him to the core. Why him? He muttered under his breath, chest tight. Why does it have to be him? Karina looked up, her heart aching at the vulnerability in his voice. For once, he didn't look like a mafia boss. He looked like a father, a terrified father. She stepped closer, their shoulders nearly touching, her voice soft but firm. Because he's alive. And as long as he is, he has a chance. You have a chance. Their eyes met, the air thick between them. For a moment, it felt like the world had shrunk to just the three of them. Two broken adults, a fragile child, and a bond neither expected. Wonshik's hand twitched at his side, as though he wanted to reach for her. But before he could, the doctor arrived. Hours later, after Ki was treated and finally sleeping peacefully, Karina sat in the nursery, exhaustion etched across her face. She had refused to leave his side. The door creaked open. Wonshik entered silently, his presence filling the room. He'll be fine, he said quietly, his voice rough with relief. Karina nodded, her eyes soft as she looked at the sleeping boy. He's stronger than he looks. Silence stretched between them, heavy, but not uncomfortable. Wonshik moved closer, his gaze fixed not on his son, but on her. On the woman who had somehow walked into his house, his world, and brought peace where there had been none. You're different, he said suddenly, his voice low. Karina blinked, startled. Different. He nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. Every other nanny, every other woman, they came for the money, the power, the name. But you're here for him. Her breath caught. She wanted to deny it, to say it was only the money, but she couldn't. Not when Ki's tiny hand still clutched her sleeve even in sleep. Wonshik stepped closer. So close she could see the faint scar near his jaw, the way his chest rose and fell with each breath. I don't trust people easily, he murmured. But with you, his voice trailed off, as though even he couldn't believe the words forming in his mouth. Karina's heart pounded, her lips parting slightly. The air between them was electric, charged with something inevitable. His gaze dropped to her lips. Her breath hitched. For a moment, the world stilled, the mafia boss and the nanny, standing on the edge of something forbidden, dangerous, but undeniable. He leaned in, just enough that she could feel the warmth of his breath. And then,
Bang!
The sound of gunfire shattered the night. Wonshik stiffened instantly, instincts kicking in. He pulled back, his expression hardening, the softness gone. Stay here, he ordered, his voice sharp. Karina's chest ached at the sudden distance, at the kiss that almost was. But before she could respond, he was gone, the dragon tattoo on his neck disappearing into the shadows of the hall as chaos erupted outside. Gunfire rattled the mansion windows like a storm of steel. Karina clutched Ki to her chest, ducking low by the crib as shouts and boots thundered through the halls. Her heart pounded so loud, she could barely hear anything else. Outside the nursery door, Wonshik's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Seal the east wing. No one gets through that door, no one. The dragon tattoo on his neck had flared into life again. No longer the father trembling over his feverish son. Now he was the Mafia king, commanding his soldiers with lethal precision. But beneath the steel, Karina could still hear it, the fear. Not for himself. For them. The door burst open and he strode in, 2 guns holstered at his sides. His eyes scanned the room until they landed on her. "Are you hurt?" His voice was sharp, urgent. She shook her head, clutching Key tighter. One chick crossed the room in 3 strides, crouched before her. His hand, still trembling faintly from adrenaline, brushed her arm. "Stay behind me. Whatever happens, don't let go of him." Karina opened her mouth to argue, but the look in his eyes stopped her. It wasn't a command, it was a plea. He turned, gun in hand, just as the first intruder crashed through the window. The fight was brutal. One chick moved with the precision of a man who had lived half his life on the edge of death. Every shot was clean, every strike lethal. His men held the line, but the enemies were many. Karina huddled in the corner, Key's small face buried against her neck. Tears streaked down her cheeks, not just from fear, but from the unbearable sight of one chick throwing himself into the fire. This was his world. This was the truth she had tried not to see. And yet, when his eyes flicked back to her between every shot, it wasn't the empire he was fighting for. It was her. When the last intruder fell, silence swallowed the mansion. Bodies littered the marble floor. One chick stood heaving, blood at his temple, chest rising and falling like he'd just wrestled death itself. He dropped his gun,
Crossed the room.
and, without a word, pulled her into his arms. Karina gasped, still holding Key between them, her cheek pressed to the bloodied silk of his shirt. His body shook, but his embrace was iron. "I thought I'd lose you," he whispered, raw, broken. Her breath caught. One chick. He pulled back just enough to look at her. His eyes blazed, not with fury, but with something far more dangerous.
Want. Need. Love.
"I can't do this anymore," he said hoarsely. "I can't pretend you're just his nanny. I can't watch you hold him, smile at him, and not want it to be us. All of us." Her lips trembled. The world around them was blood and ruin, but his words seared straight into her chest. Before she could speak, he kissed her. It wasn't soft. It wasn't tentative. It was a collision of fury, of longing, of 2 people who had tried too hard to resist. Karina gasped against his mouth, her free hand clutching his shirt. The kiss deepened, his hand cradling the back of her head, his body trembling with everything he had kept locked away. For the first time, she kissed him back. The kiss broke only when a gun clattered against the floor behind them. They turned. A man, bloodied but alive, had dragged himself upright, a pistol shaking in his grip. His gaze flicked between one chick and Karina, and then he sneered. The great Han one chick brought to his knees by a woman. Pathetic. The gun swung toward Karina. Time froze. One chick moved without thinking, placing himself squarely between her and the barrel. His voice was steady, but his eyes burned. "Kill me, not them." Karina gasped, her hand clutching his sleeve. "No!" But it was too late. The shot rang out. One chick staggered, then surged forward with a roar, ripping the gun away and snapping the man's neck with a savage twist. Silence. He turned back to her, blood spreading across his shoulder. His face was pale, but his eyes were steady. "You see," he rasped, "this is my world, and I'd burn it all for you." Her tears blurred her vision. She pressed a trembling hand against his wound. "You idiot! Don't you dare die on me." His lips twitched, almost a smile. "Not when you finally kiss me." They stitched him up. His men cleared the mansion. Key slept peacefully, blissfully unaware of the storm. And when night fell, one chick found Karina on the balcony, the city lights stretching like stars beneath them. She didn't turn when he approached, but she spoke softly. "I should run. You're dangerous. Your world is poison." And yet, her voice broke. "I can't leave you. Either of you." One chick's hand slid around her waist, pulling her back against him. His lips brushed her ear. Then don't, he murmured.
Stay.
With me. With us. Be more than his nanny. Be ours. Karina closed her eyes, leaning into him. His warmth, his strength, his madness. It was all too much, and yet exactly what she wanted. She turned in his arms, looking up at him, her heart hammering. If I stay, there's no turning back. His gaze burned into hers. I don't want you to. This time, when he kissed her, it was slow, deep, and certain. A vow in the dark. Months later, the mansion was quieter, safer. Karina sat in the garden, Key toddling across the grass toward one chick, who knelt waiting, arms wide. The dragon tattoo still curled across his neck, but today it was softened by the laughter in his eyes. Karina watched them, her chest full. She wasn't the nanny anymore. She was family. One chick caught Key in his arms, then looked up at her. The man who had once been untouchable, ruthless, feared, smiled at her like she was the only person who mattered. And in that smile, Karina knew the truth. Love had not made him weaker. It had made him whole. Beneath the porcelain sky, danger still lurked, shadows still whispered. But she wasn't afraid anymore. Because, whatever storms came, they would face them together. The Mafia king, the nanny, and the child who bound them. Forever.